Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Butler, I'm pleased to have worked with Chair McHenry on some bipartisan policy solutions, including improving access to capital while protecting investors and creating a legal framework for stablecoins to help our nation's consumers, working families, and small businesses. Another area where I believe there is room for more bipartisanship is data privacy. Consumers deserve ownership over their own data, which would include control over that data is shared. Years ago, I even advocated that consumers should be offered a check from corporations that use their data. The research shows that data rights help consumers make better financial decisions and increases competition by allowing them to switch from financial products that are not working for them to ones that better fit their needs. So, Mr. Butler, what principles do you see as most important when it comes to data privacy for consumers, and how would establishing these principles lead to better outcomes for consumers?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Waters. I think that you touched on one of the core elements there is choice, right? Meaningful ability of consumers to control what happens to their data, and that requires not only functional knowledge, but real enforceable rights. Because in the general marketplace as we see it now, most of the privacy information that consumers are given is take it or leave it. Here are the practices of these firms on a piece of paper, and now you know, but you don't really have any meaningful choice to make. You also mentioned competition in the marketplace, and I think there's difficulty in switching costs in the financial services industry that limit the ability of consumers to feel free to move from one system to another. That I think causes a limitation on the ability of firms to really compete on privacy practices. And I think ultimately a principle of data minimization, of aiming to limit the collection of personal information to what's actually necessary to provide these services, I think is a key concept that needs to be incorporated into the policies and practices in the field to better position consumers to make those choices and to be protected against those practices.
Thank you. I'd like to go to AI. Mr. Butler, with the rapid evolution of generative AI, I'm concerned about the possibility of creating new systemic risks in our financial market. The reality is that today, data collection practices for generative AI are largely opaque, and many consumers may be unaware of the details regarding the training data used in their AI services. My home state of California is working to address these challenges and recently enacted a law centered on training data transparency. This law requires developers to make public certain information about the data used to train their generative AI system. Mr. Butler, in your view, what kind of generative AI disclosures would be most beneficial to consumers? Could data transparency requirements potentially protect us against systemic harms like misinformation, discrimination, and data privacy risk?
Thank you for the question. I think that transparency is a critical first step, as you said, to training data sets in particular, because the ability to test and evaluate in a public and transparent way the source of the logic behind an AI system, I think is essential to be able to evaluate the fairness of that system and whether it implicates the type of systemic risks you mentioned in terms of disinformation or discrimination. If we don't know what data goes in, then it's really hard to evaluate the quality of the outputs that are coming from that system.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Arkansas, the vice chair and the subcommittee chair